What if animals could talk?
This is a world. This is a world premiere. This is a world.
Hey, Reg here, and welcome to another Wednesday Hump Day rant. So I got a couple of things that I want to talk about with you guys. First of all, did anybody catch the Van Jones discussion of the Donald Trump sexual harassment language? It was kind of amazing, and he basically, instead of getting engaged in the argument about whether Donald Trump's language was appropriate or not, he simply pointed out the fact that what Donald Trump was describing in that video when he was caught on a hot mic saying things about, groping strangers and kissing on strangers, what he's describing is basically sexual assault. So maybe the conversation right now is all twisted and is not whether or not Donald Trump would be an appropriate candidate for president, but whether or not Donald Trump should be arrested for sexual assaulting women. There was a video that I watched recently in which a young person is disturbed because they got into a discussion with someone who was older, and the person who was older apparently, was pretty rough on them. And so they were saying in the video that it was not fair that an older person should try to have a discussion or should say things that are hurtful towards a younger person. I think basically that is very ageist, because if I, as an older person, were to say to a young person, I'm not going to engage in a discussion with you because you're young, that would be pretty unfair. And so I think at the same time, it's unfair for a young person to say, well, you can't win in this discussion because you're older than me, and then that's not fair. So just let's not get into a thing about who can and cannot have a discussion with whom based on their age. As long as everyone's a legal adult, I think it's all fair game. Another thing that I want to talk about is this idea of agreeing to disagree. So agreeing to disagree really only works if both parties have both the same information and the same understanding and ability to comprehend the information that's been given to them. So if someone, for example, is arguing that bacon is healthy and they haven't done any research, that's not disagreement. That's one person being ignorant. Much of the disagreeing that I experience on this platform is about ignorance more than it is about either a philosophical or a moral incompatibility. Sadly, much ignorance is also just willful. It's people choosing to stay ignorant about science, history, culture, and the lived experience of others. Now back to the main topic of this video. If animals could talk. Now, if humans found a way to accurately interpret the language of animals, as they obviously have ways to communicate with each other, what would they say to us, and what would their attitude towards humans be? I want to be transparent. I have a point that I want to make, and as usual, I want to connect the experience of animals to groups who experience oppression. Sadly, the culprits may overlap, so apologies in advance if this rant offends a group to which you belong. Now, I want to focus on animals who are the targets of exploitation in the animal commodities industry. Now, I also want to bestow on animals, in case there is any doubt about the cognitive abilities of animals to understand the situation in which they have been placed. Okay, I'm talking about analyzing their reality and placing that in a historical context as well. In other words, let's assume that animals have the power to understand what we do to them as harmful to them, and that it's something done systemically and intentionally to exploit them. Now, there are many animals that are naturally distrustful of humans, so it's not like humans are all that popular in the animal kingdom to begin with. But let's look specifically at bovines in the so-called meat industry. What would a cow and steer and their young say to humans about the suffering that they go through? What would a cow in a rape wreck say? What would a cow say as her baby was being ripped away from her? What would cows and bulls say, for example, as they came through the chute and out onto the killing floor? Would they plead for their lives? Would they ask for mercy? Would they appeal to our sense of humanity to stop the brutality? And how might humans respond? Would we try to reason with them to explain why it was normal, natural, and necessary that we kill them, and at the rates that we kill them to satisfy our own taste buds? And what would they think of us as a species? Would they say that some humans are brutal, focusing on the fact that not all humans are the same? Or would that be insignificant, as most of the humans they encounter are either directly part of their torture and murder, while those who are not stand idly by while it continues? Would it be fair for Bovine to make the assessment that humans were the enemy? If by some miracle animals were liberated, how long before they could be expected to forget what had been done to them for millennia? Would they instantly embrace humans as friends, or would they hold on to their fears that at any time humans could change their minds and go back to their old ways? Would we, knowing that perhaps they hated us for what we as a species have done to them, then judge them for their hate towards us? Would we say Bovine were guilty of speciesism for lumping all humans into one category and thinking that we're all bad? Or would we police their language when they talk about the way humans treat animals? Would we demand that they treat us all as individuals, even though we often stand by and tolerate the treatment of animals, even vegans? Now, if a cow were to tell her tale of misery to a vegan, would it be a fair response for the vegan to say, "But I'm vegan, I don't eat animals"? Or would that matter, as the vegan likely knows many humans, perhaps is friends with some of them, who do eat animals? I think when we look at other manifestations of oppression, we might consider this little hypothetical and apply it to the reality that humans face with oppression, where the targets can speak, they do appeal to the humanity of others, they do share their lived experiences, and they often have representatives from groups benefiting from their oppression, often excusing the behavior of the people who engage in it. We hear members of oppressed groups being accused of the very oppressions that they confront. We hear Black people who confront racism being accused of racism for discussing whites benefiting from racism. We hear women being called man-haters for reacting to male dominance. This happens even though there are centuries of documented cases involving the majority of the members of these groups with consistent participation from the offending group, acting as a group to exploit Black people, to exploit women, to exploit other oppressed groups. For the foreseeable future, animals will not be turning the tables on humans, and so to accuse them of speciesism, in my opinion, would be outrageous. I think the same is true for racism, where clearly Africans are not going to be turning the tables on the Europeans that have continued to exploit Africans, the descendants of Africans, the continent of Africa. Calling a Black person racist is about as useful as calling an animal a speciesist. Calling a woman sexist is equally illogical, as women do not or will not in the foreseeable future, even if Hillary Clinton is elected president, be in the position to turn the tables of exploitation around on men. This is true of any oppressed group. The oppression works because the dominant group has the power. So, what do you think about this? If animals talked and didn't like people, would that make them speciesist? Do you think it's fair to accuse members of oppressed groups of being guilty of the very oppressions that they are trying to confront? That's it for this video. Like it if you like it, share, comment, subscribe. This is Reg signing off. Love yourself. Peace. And I love myself.